Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to install code on a OASIS platform such as the EM-60, and there's two methods of doing that. The first method is via the USB port here. It does require that the bootloader is installed on the EM-60, which is the case as it comes from the factory. Sometimes as you're using your development environment, you may just wipe out the bootloader as part of that, and that's okay. I'll show you how to reinstall it. Let me minimize this screen here. So you select DSSUpdate here. Then you go to communication, select the proper serial port. In this case, it's COM6. It's just called out as USB serial port. I also like to call up the raw communication window. Let's get that here. And then finally, action update firmware. You select the firmware file, which has to be a .s19 file, which is generated by the development system Code Composer Studio. Okay, now the process starts. Here, these characters you see there is the DSSUpdate getting trying to get the application to pass control back to the bootloader on the EM-60. That doesn't work for all applications. The application would have to run communicate at 9600 baud, which is what the bootloader is doing. So, but that process here now started, and you see the code flowing to the EM-60 and the acknowledgement reply from the EM-60. We are at 13% now. Let me mention one thing here is like, what would happen if I now just discontinued this download? If I unplugged the USB or lost power, you would have a partial application on the EM-60. But not to worry, the bootloader will recognize that that happened, and it will install a dummy app instead that tells you that there's really no valid application on the bootloader. So it's not bricked. You're not going to run a partial application on your machine here. It handles that gracefully. All right, we're at 32% now. I'll pause the recording here until we get close to the end. All right, so we are up at 95% now, coming in on the end, and then notice down here what you'll see. This is now the bootloader talking, saying upload okay. The bootloader is restarted, and then 30 seconds later, the application, the bootloader will pass control to the application. So that's the first method, code installation via USB. A second method of code installation is through the JTAG debugging interface. And here you can see the debugging dongle, which is connected by USB to your PC. We go through this connector adapter and this flex cable here to the JTAG connector. You can also power the board by USB at the same time and receive data through USB, but it's also powered through the JTAG interface. Code installation and debugging is tied together in Code Composer Studio, and so the way it works is you select your project here. You can then go to Run up here and hit Debug Project. Now you see down here that there's some activity going on as code is being installed, and there's also blinking on the LED, status LED, the red status LED of the JTAG debug dongle. Once the process is completed, the debugger will start executing but stop at main, which is highlighted here. And then you have single step functions available here, like step over and step into, or you can just let the code run. And I will do that here. I'll go to a terminal program, so my USB is also connected, and after a while I get some information from this test application here. I can call up my test menu and so on. Now, when you install an application, it does clear the entire memory of the microcontroller if you install it through the JTAG interface. So if you need to recover the bootloader, that works as follows. Again, you click on Run. This time you click on Load and Load Program. Then you find the program for it, the program file. It's a .hex file as it's generated directly by Code Composer Studio. And I think I have it in this folder here, bootloader EM-60, and open that and hit OK here. And now the bootloader has been reinstalled, but the application is lost. Now you could also make a file that includes the bootloader and the application, and that can be useful for production purposes when you have to initialize a whole bunch of boards to the same state. Let me look at it here. Again, I have them in my production firmware folder, and here's some files here: bootloader, EM-60 bootloader version 2.00, and test EM-60 test version 1.00, and I can download that here. This takes a little bit longer now, but there we're done, and we have both the bootloader and the application installed again. Now, I mentioned these hex files, which you can use, such as to install a bootloader or any piece of code back onto your device without having it be part of, a development process here. So we just went over that, but how do you generate a .hex file? It's quite simple. For a given project that you want to generate it for, like here, you go to Project Properties, and then you go to a hex utility. And what's important here is that you have enable the hex utility, which will generate your hex file every time you build your project. And then watch these flags here, that you want to use them just like they are here. We're using the Motorola S record format for the hex files. Specifically, the -2 means with 24-bit address space rather than 16-bit address space, because the MSP430 FR5994 uses that 24-bit address space. So whenever you have this selected, then automatically when you do a build, a new hex file is generated for you. Let's take a brief look at these hex files. Here's one of them. This is the EM-60 bootloader. So they're just text files, the Motorola S records. And most of these data lines here are download information. So this is the actual code here. The way it works is here it says, okay, this is an S2 command. So again, S record here, and then type 2, which is download some code. Then the next one here, 1E, is how many bytes are there. And then we have the start address, in this case 24 bits, therefore 3 bytes, where that is going to get downloaded to, then all the data and the checksum. There's also a starting word here, S0, and then similar at the end, there's a word there, S8. So if you want to combine more than one file, you can just do that in an editor like that, copy and paste. but you should only have one S0 and one S8 at the end. So if you copy something else into it, don't copy the first and the last line, only everything in between copy, and then say paste here between the first and the second line, for example. Summarizing, we can install code either through the USB interface, but the bootloader has to be present here, and we use the DSSUpdate utility, or alternatively, we can install through the JTAG interface here using Code Composer Studio. Thank you.